in general for thumb-stopping content, to me, it's a really important mix of, it's the art and the science. Having something that, moves the heart and the mind, that is done in a way that shows, I think, style. And I think something that can evoke emotion, whether it's, emotion of awe, right? Or emotion of humor. I think that finding those really important emotions that your brand authentically can connect to and utilize is a really good way for people to have that thumb-stopping content.
This is the CMO and Joe podcast. We interview today's most inspiring chief marketing officers and savvy marketers of lucrative direct-to-consumer e-commerce companies, bringing you insightful stories and tips on marketing, sales, branding, and much more. We bring you the best lessons from the best. Let's get started with your host, Joe Momoh.
And we are live. Welcome to the podcast, Greg.
Hey, Joe. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
Well, I'm super excited to have you on the podcast. Obviously, you're the head of e-commerce marketing at Clif, but you have a ton of experience in marketing, branding, and I'm super excited to have you on here. But before we jump into all that, perhaps give us a little backstory of who you are, what you're up to.
Yeah, so Greg Yeadon, proudly working at Clif Bar, leading the e-commerce marketing team. And my background is really mostly in marketing and brand management and innovation. I get a lot of inspiration from all those different areas, and I really enjoy it. It's a great profession, so I consider myself lucky to be able to do it. I've kind of always been interested in marketing, even like as a kid, which is when I look back to the things I really was drawn to. I see that really reflecting in what I do today. I can always remember when my dad would come home from, business trips, and he'd have his USA Today and his Wall Street Journal. A lot of people go right to the sports page or the front page. I would always go to the business page, and I would always be most interested in like the news about new advertising campaigns and new product launches and those kinds of stories. So in a way, for me, marketing has always been kind of on my radar of something really interesting that, combines that creative and that business side of things, which I think makes it such a compelling profession.
Absolutely. It sounds like you're a very precocious kid. What was kind of your first step into the marketing world, kind of your first job?
Yeah. First job, that's a really good question. I'll tell you this, the first money I ever made was from door-to-door sales as a little kid trying to sell cards. So I was pretty precocious with that. And then I tried selling my dad's garden vegetables. He didn't like that too much. First jobs, I did a lot of landscaping, which is, very traditional, not uncommon type of thing. Neighborhood landscaping and turning that into a little hustle as a middle school student. That was probably my first work, my first, kind of paid work. Did a lot of work in restaurants, honestly. So not necessarily the marketing side, but, being able to juggle orders and the kitchen and the front of the house, there's actually quite a lot of parallels to running a branded business, believe it or not. So that was some of my first work experience. And also, I think a really great job for anybody to do starting out, try to do food service, try to do something in that as you're growing into, your world. I think there's a lot to learn there. But officially my first jobs my first job out of college was with a pharmaceutical biotech company, which Pfizer bought, called Wyeth Pharmaceuticals. And I did have a passion for marketing, but I didn't get into it right away. I didn't find, a lot of great opportunities coming out of the Richmond, Virginia area, which I went to undergrad at University of Richmond. And I had a really compelling opportunity with one of the top pharmaceutical firms in their biotech division, and got to work firsthand with the doctors who were running clinical trials for, really new to world cancer drugs. And my role was kind of as a business, the business end of the research side. So helping them, get their operations up and running with vendors and ensuring those vendors were vetted and had the right agreements and cost negotiated and all that kind of stuff. So I worked on that for about a year or two. And then I worked on the production side of the biotech business and also in kind of a sourcing and business development capacity. And I say this, very fondly. I love the people. I love that business. I love what it does. And it's just so many passionate people looking to help the world. It just wasn't the most exciting thing for me. And that's really why I decided that I wanted to push forward and really try to get into brand management. And I went through the whole process of applying for business schools and GMATs and essays and all that. And I wound up at my first choice, which was the Kellogg School of Management in Evanston, Illinois. It's part of the Northwestern University. And that was my kind of first official dipping into marketing, and just really had an amazing experience there. I started working after Kellogg at 3M in Minnesota, and moved up to Minnesota and worked for the amazing Post-it brand and that team there. So I had some really great experience in that business and had some really fun things happen. I made a move to the East Coast and started working at Edgewell Personal Care, which at the time was called Energizer Personal Care. So think about like Schick and Banana Boat and Playtex and all those great personal care brands. And had a really great experience there. We ended up moving out to the West Coast. My wife and I, we were in Connecticut at the Edgewell job, and we decided that we didn't really love where we lived at the time. And we said, hey, before we have kids, let's figure out like where we really, really want to be. And that brought us to the Bay Area. So I got to work with a very entrepreneurial, larger company called Central Garden and Pet, which is the biggest supplier of pet care supplies in the U.S., and got to take some of their fledgling businesses and really, really turn them around and be very entrepreneurial with them. So these are businesses that didn't really have a playbook per se, like a lot of the big CPGs have, which to me was exciting. I think to some people that's daunting, but I love opportunities like that where there's white space and brands that need a little bit more love to get them in the right place. So I was there for about 6 years, and a couple of the big brands I worked on there were Comfort Zone, which is now the number one brand in the whole space of pet calming, which is a big space. 70% of pets have anxiety. I don't know if you knew that, Joe.
Oh, wow. No.
But there's a lot of anxious pets out there during these summer thunderstorms. On some big flea and tick care businesses as well there. I moved over to Clif Bar in a different role. My prior roles were really as brand manager, and so I had that traditional brand manager perspective and kind of the hub of the wheel that brand management is in terms of leading various aspects of the business and coordinating with all the amazing cross-functionals you get to work with. And then this role came to me for leading the e-commerce marketing team. And I was really excited about it. I had known about Clif Bar for a while. I had read Gary Erickson, the founder's book, Raising the Bar, back in 2011. So I was a big fan. And this was a new group they formed to really put some discipline to harness e-commerce in a big way. And I've been there, for the last year and a half, and it's been really a really great journey.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny how your journey, on the serendipity of your journey, it gives you many life experiences that add to kind of your what you're doing now. And if you had to boil down kind of one or two main lessons or learnings during your path or your career, Greg, what advice would you give to somebody wanting to pursue marketing, or even somebody in marketing now? What kind of pieces of advice would you give them?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me was just learning to be more focused and oriented towards growth opportunities as opposed to being goal oriented. And what I mean by that is learning to have less emphasis on, hey, what's my next, role and promotion, having that mindset, which a lot of people get tied up in. But, from an early time, being focused on, here's some experiences I want to get. And I believe these experiences will really help me to build the types of things that I think I'll need to have in the future, that I want to have, that I'm interested in. And I tell you, being growth oriented has really helped me personally scale, because those skill sets, they really do scale. You start adding things to each other. For instance, with my current role, like really diving deep into the e-commerce world, I had done a lot with it, but man, I know so much more now, and it's very helpful, and it helps me work with my brand teams and my senior leadership to craft and execute strategy. So I'd say, focus on things you want to grow on, and try to take experiences that get you that growth, because growth will benefit you in ways that probably would be unexpected. And towards that ends, I think the other advice I would have is, taking incremental steps. It's really hard to go from 1 to 10, right? You have to hit all those other numbers in between. So trying to, it's good to have a long-term view, and, for instance, like a 3-year plan, or a 3-year goal. Maybe it's better just to, when you boil those things down, try to imagine those small steps you can take to get to what those goals are. That way it's a lot less intimidating, and you kind of get away from the inertia of, this big goal. Like, I don't know how I'm going to do this. How do I break it down? So I'd say make things incremental if you can.
No, I have to second that, Greg. I think that's super important when you're on your journey. Although it seems like a lot of people have been a little derailed from their goals because of the whole pandemic. But from your perspective, Greg, what's kind of been the most challenging parts of the pandemic? It could be personally, professionally, and how have you managed to stay growth oriented during the times?
That's a really, really great and important question. The biggest challenge kind of stems from personal challenge, and that's, having 2 amazing little girls, and how do you keep them engaged and doing the right things when you're stuck at home in a type of, in a quarantine, in a shelter in place? That was really, really, really difficult. They need a lot of support, and both my wife and I are working full time. So thankfully, we both have companies that have some nice flexible policies that enable us to carve out certain amounts of time that we need to care for our family. So that's been a really amazing benefit for us. But that's hard. I mean, they need a lot of support, and they say that every time you're interrupted, it takes 23 minutes to refocus on what you're doing. And I don't know how much time you spent with a toddler, but they like to interrupt a lot. So that makes work productivity really, really hard. For us, the situation has definitely improved. Like I said, the company has been very supportive, and we also have been able to find, as the county and the state have gone more open in California, ways for them to get care from their schools and their teachers. So it's it's been an interesting journey so far. That has been a challenge, and as I inferred from the care that they need, that becomes a lot harder to be the worker that you want to be. And I know that you have a fire in the belly as well, Joe, but just wanting to get to all the things that you're passionate about to help grow your business and grow your team becomes a lot more challenging when you've got little ones that also need your care. And I found a couple things that have helped me along the way, just to be very more reflective, I think, during this time. So I have adopted, after the advice of hearing from a really great Kellogg professor, Harry Kramer, about the importance of doing maybe some work journaling. And I've taken on a habit of trying to do that every day, of trying to understand, what have I done well? What can I do better? And that's helped me kind of, pick my head up from this really odd time that we're all in, where all the days kind of blend together, and still enable myself to be reflective and try to work on some personal growth. So those are, that's been the biggest challenge for me. It's also challenging from the perspective of, work and team and culture. It's really hard to have a uniform culture when everyone is working at home and away, as much as you try to do it. And keep those core cultural elements. That's important, but it's a lot more challenging. And it's also challenging. I've onboarded a new employee, and doing that remotely is also a challenge. It's just a different muscle that I don't think any of us really have built before. And it takes a lot of care, and it's great. I love onboarding and developing a team, but it's definitely a new skill set.
Absolutely. I appreciate those comments. I think just to switch gears a little bit, I want to maybe jump into a little bit more marketing stuff. From your perspective, Greg, how's the marketing industry changed from when you first started to now?
When I was first starting, I think media is probably the biggest change, to one extent. As digital has become life, you hear less and less about, hey, what's our print campaign going to be for next year? And every brand on their selling slides to a customer, you have this kind of, I've seen this everywhere, this kind of like wheel of marketing where it shows like the 360-degree plan. And man, those plans are so much different these days. From print really, struggling, still having a home. And I think, you can find great opportunities in print if it matches where your target consumer is, but, print on the downslide, radio obviously on the downslide, but morphing into things like this, right? Into podcasting, which is just an amazing medium for many purposes. TV and the advent of OTT or streaming, I think that's a really huge opportunity, especially as that gets more intelligent in tying together the user and ways to find the right people and get the right products and services in front of them in a compelling way. Social media is obviously a gigantic one. When I was at 3M, I remember this was in like 2007. I think I joined Facebook in 2006 when I was at grad school. And in 2007, I was working on Post-it brand. And I remember saying like, well, hey, this is, the product I was working on was really for students. Like, this is where students are. We have to find a way to market to them. So I was the first person at 3M to think about using Facebook as a marketing tool, which was pretty fun to do. So that obviously that changes here. Social media marketing is here in a major way. The other big change, I think, is Amazon as both a sales and a marketing force. Early on into Amazon's foray into consumer goods, I was part of, again, probably one of the first projects at the company I was at Energizer Personal Care, to say like, hey, this is not just a sales platform. This is a marketing platform. What can we do here? So I've had a vision for that as well. And that's really obviously come true in a major way, in many surprising ways. And I think, if I were to look forward, what I'm seeing from how are things going to change from a marketing perspective, I think that artificial intelligence is kind of that next unlock for marketers. And there's a lot of ways that can be unlocked. Kind of the first way that I've worked on it is with a startup called Visit, VIZIT, .ai. And they have a really cool technology that helps you understand how engaging are my images to my audience. And let's face it, having thumb-stopping content is so important in this world, whether it's your main e-commerce hero image or your social media ad. We are bombarded by thousands and thousands of stimuli, right? So how can you leverage technology so that it's easier for you to stand out? So that's just one aspect of AI, and Visit is a really cool company but there's others too. There's AI companies that do customer relationship management. That's another big area I think that we're seeing some growth in. So there's a lot to come there. And I think for people who are visionary and can see the ability for technology to affect marketing, I think there's a lot of opportunity.
Absolutely. It's funny that you mentioned thumb-stopping content. I know for me, myself, whenever I do have a little bit of spare time and I do browse social media networks, I'm always going through it at such a rapid scroll speed that it does take something outstanding for me to stop and ponder. So I'm curious from your perspective, Greg, what's kind of the elements of or content elements that would lead to a compelling creative?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. You know, just from a really structural standpoint, I think there's a lot to do with color and space. So in terms of what's on the creative, like there are things that are more engaging to our brains than other things are, like the type of photography angle, right? Or as I mentioned, juxtaposition of colors. There are things that stand out based on our inert wiring. And it's, you know, with some of these technologies, you can figure out what those are. But you know, in general, for thumb-stopping content, to me, it's a really important mix of, you know, it's the art and the science. Having something that, you know, moves the heart and the mind, that is done in a way that shows, I think, style, and I think something that can evoke emotion, you know, whether it's, you know, emotion of awe, right? Or emotion of humor. I think that finding those really important emotions that your brand authentically can connect to and utilize is a really good way for people to have that thumb-stopping content.
Absolutely. My question, though, I'm always curious, invoking those emotions. What's been kind of the most successful marketing campaign that you've ever worked on that has evoked those type of emotions and return on investment?
You know, marketing is really interesting. I think a lot of people think marketing equals magic. But I think my marketing equation would be marketing is magic times math. So some of the most successful campaigns I've been on, you know, might be like the least sexy, just because they really made an impact on the business. I mean, and how do you define success with a marketing campaign? I mean, it probably should be sales, right? I mean, that's a major one. You could have something that's maybe is more PR oriented. Like, how do we get people to realize that my company does these awesome things? And maybe it's, you know, a traffic, or a sentiment, a long-term sentiment type of KPI. But for me, I'm typically most interested in what I can do to support sales. And probably one of the most successful ones I worked on was a big national ad campaign for Banana Boat, launching a new product. And Banana Boat's a sunscreen, Banana Boat Cool Zone Sport. It kind of had a cooling effect on you, and it had a different scent. And so it was actually a really neat innovation. You know, we had, I think, what helps generate sales, I think, is really all parts of that marketing engine working for you: distribution, you know, pricing, in-person interaction with consumers. We had a really compelling activation that we did with NASCAR and NASCAR tracks to help people from getting sunburned while they're out there on long, hot days. But the clincher was really the national ad campaign we put together. You know, it was that big 360 typical print in those days. This was like 2010. Print and TV and social and everything. And, you know, in the end, because of this really good 360 connection, we grew sales quite a bit, and we took a lot of share points from the other brands in the category. So it was just to look at that program from beginning to start and comparing it to prior year. It was just a massive shift in the market, and it was caused by really all of those elements. So It was great execution. The creative was also really great. We had an innovative TV ad campaign that was kind of like if you made a Rube Goldberg type of device for people. Envision that with your mind's eye. Really talked about the how Banana Boat protects for the 7 conditions, which I probably can't remember them all today, but sun, sand, water, etc. There's other ones too, but it's been a while. So that was very, very successful. But that was one of those big, massive, consumer goods campaigns, which is something that requires a lot of coordination, big company. But you can also have a lot of success with things that are maybe that seem more tactical. And I would say, remarketing campaigns on Amazon have been really, really successful for us. And finding ways to leverage all of the great traffic that you get and remind people of your awesome products is a really important aspect to marketing, which, is not universally adopted yet. I think a lot of the digital native brands do this, of course. Many of the CPG brands do it. But it is just, it's one of those things. It might not seem like the coolest campaign ever, but it's incredibly successful.
Absolutely. I love when you mentioned the magic plus math. I'm definitely going to start using that. Speaking of that, but let's say hypothetically, I always love to ask this question to expert marketers like yourself, Greg, but let's say you got an extra 50% of budget. How and what type of things would you spend that on to get that ROI back?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. With that kind of budget, if that was kind of added on to a plan, I think a really interesting play to invest more in right now would be doing more with connected TV and trying to expand audiences using all the great connected TV tools. A lot of marketers are having trouble getting going with connected TV because I think the mindset is, hey, let's make a choice. Let's go with this one and see how it does. When really those audiences, in many cases, don't overlap. And so you'll be missing a part of the market. So it's a really new, interesting space, which I think makes it exciting. I think that means there's also a lot of opportunity there. And there's some cool companies in the space trying to help brands get better at it. There's a company called TV Data Now, which is new on the scene, and they've got a great kind of starter kit to get brands going in that whole space. So, yeah, I think that's a really big, compelling space for many brands, and I'd say that would be a big priority.
From your perspective, Greg, what are some of the marketing trends that are really exciting you right now, or that you see from your perspective?
For me, I still really, really love knowing what digitally native brands are up to in the world of all these hundreds of venture-backed direct-to-consumer brands. There's so many really cool things that they're doing in different categories, and I think there's a lot that you can learn from how they go to market and from what the successful ones are doing. And I really enjoy seeing the creative angles they have on meeting a consumer need. Trying to find a niche out there that they can attach to and then expand their market from there. So there's a great resource. I don't know the full website, but the group is called IAB, and there's a whole list of digitally native brands on there. They have like a top 250 list. It's a really interesting read to start looking at some of those brands and what they're doing. So I think that's not a new trend. It's been going on for in a big way. I want to say probably the last 4 years, but there's still so much that these really creative entrepreneurial companies can do. There's so much opportunity.
Is there? Oh, from what you can share, though, is there one in particular, a brand or even a marketer that you've really admired the last few years?
There's a few. I'll say personally, in terms of something that's an amazing combination of a physical product and a software content ecosystem is Peloton. Now I know, as a disclaimer, they had a pretty odd Christmas ad campaign, a lot of negative press. So my comment is not about their ad campaign. It's really about, the core of what they built, which is just a really amazing bike and the online classes, and then just expanding that whole class content ecosystem to yoga and running and meditation. Pretty amazing. So as a user and also as a marketer, I'm just in awe of everything they've done. And, gosh, Joe, talk about, right product, right time for them, huh? I mean,
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they've really built out a community of people. Obviously a great product. And I think having that community is almost foundational to building a pretty big, successful brand like a Peloton. Yeah.
So that's a major success on a very complex product. You're going a little more simply. One product that is in my pantry every day is Banzo, which is this noodle company that makes pasta from chickpeas. So it's gluten free. The product itself, I mean, it still doesn't have the mouthfeel and the taste that you would from a wheat-based pasta. So I think there's never anything that'll be an absolute replacement for the deliciousness of, handmade Italian raviolis or something like that. But it's a great substitute because I myself had to medically cut out gluten a little while ago, and it's been nice to reintroduce, pasta back into the kitchen for myself. So I'm a big fan of that, and I know they're doing really well. I see them on end cap at Whole Foods pretty much all the time.
My fiance actually is a big chickpea pasta person herself, and yeah, I've tried it myself, and it's pretty comparable. I'd say pretty comparable.
Yeah.
There's one question I always love to ask. Also, it may be a little tricky if you call it, but what's one question, Greg, that you never get asked that you wish you would be asked?
Yeah, that's a really really good question. I don't know if I have a great answer on that one. It probably would be, from my kids, like that they would maybe ask me more about what I'm thinking about or what I'm working on. I get a lot of questions at work, so I feel like people, I'm a pretty open book as well. So there's probably not a lot more questions they need to ask me, but yeah, probably from my kids, for them to have the ability to ask some of those questions.
Yeah, I was kind of segueing into the next question. What's kind of the biggest things Clif Bar is doing that maybe consumers don't know too much about?
Clif Bar is a really amazing company, and a very well-known brand in the U.S. and we are expanding in Canada. So I know that our products, whether it's Clif Bar or Builder's Bar or our Clif Nut Butter Bar, are big favorites for many Canadians. The biggest thing about Clif Bar that folks don't know is probably that we have such an amazing purpose as a company. We're not just a company that makes delicious and largely organically based items. We have essentially 5 bottom lines, and of course you've got your bottom lines of your business. Everyone has that, and your brands. But then we have how we sustain our people. That's an absolutely critical way of running the business, and we are accountable for how we sustain our people. We are accountable for how we sustain the planet and what we do there. We have a majorly important planet team that helps to orchestrate all kinds of initiatives in terms of what our impact is, and the impact we can have on other companies. For instance, we are very fortunate to be a leader in organic farming and we provide a lot of that research out to farmers who want to learn how to get better at it. Then, of course, we have our communities and addressing community needs and what we can do beyond just, being someone who works in a building in a community. What can you do around those communities? What can you do around your hometown? And we're very much encouraged to volunteer during the year. We have so many good volunteer programs. We do a lot of things beyond volunteering as well to help our communities. So this is a company that is truly unique. And, in a similar way, I think friends of mine, they talk about Patagonia as being a brand that does a lot of amazing things beyond the business and are well known for it. We do so many amazing things, and I would love for us to get more credit for it and for people just to have an awareness, because it's very inspiring.
Absolutely. I love the purpose, and obviously your guys' product is awesome. I remember when I was playing football, it was Clif Bar was my go-to snack before game. But no, that's awesome. That's really cool. Only a couple more questions for you here, Greg. I'd love to know what are kind of your favorite social media networks.
That's a good question. I think there's a lot of things in the news about Facebook and some of the things they're doing. I don't want to wade into that controversy other than just to say that I think there's a lot of things that need to be addressed in terms of how that company is run. Aside from that, just purely on the basis of, as a marketer, I think it's a tremendous way to reach people with your products. But I do want to separate those two issues, because the first one is a majorly important issue. Aside from that, I think in terms of consumer marketing, those are probably the ones that come first to mind, being in the B2C space. I do think as a user, LinkedIn has gotten better and better every year, and they have just an amazing team there. So I find that to be a really good place to learn and connect and get educated on things.
Where would TikTok rank in that pecking order?
I haven't really delved into the TikTok thing too much. In my day-to-day, I don't right now have social media responsibilities. So I've been a little bit social media agnostic. I know it's a big deal. Side story, my daughter started distance learning this week for her school. And after day one, she has her laptop and she says, "Daddy, does this have TikTok on it?" She's 5. She's 5.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So I'm not an expert there by any means. It does seem like people really engage with the platform and enjoy those really short bursts of content.
Yeah, absolutely. Where can our listeners connect with you online, Greg?
Yeah, they could find me on LinkedIn, and my name is Greg Yeadon, Greg, and then Yeadon. So yeah, happy to connect with other folks out there for sure.
Awesome. Well, I really appreciate you being on the podcast. I loved your stories and all your insight on marketing and kind of your career journey as well. I usually love to end the podcast with the guests saying one word or phrase to describe themselves. So my question to you, Greg, is what's one word or phrase that you would use to describe Greg Yeadon's brand? Yeah,
one word, huh?
Yeah.
You made it deceptively simple. No. For me, it's impact. The importance of making an impact, and you can take that many ways. I had a mentor of mine who was a school administrator who, when I was graduating high school, she said, "Hey, whatever you do, get out there and make an impact." And that always really stuck with me.
This episode of the CMO and Joe podcast has ended, but be sure to subscribe for more business strategies and tactics to help you create the profitable and successful business you've always dreamed of. And don't forget to rate and review so we can continue to bring you the best content. See you on the next episode.